This has happened like literally the day after we recorded our episode. Hacienda was added to the CDL map pool in all three modes. So Hacienda, Hardpoint, Search and Destroy, and Control being added in, I think effective immediately in the Call of Duty League. And Rewind has been removed from the Hardpoint and Search and Destroy map pools to make room for Hacienda. I saw a lot of chatter online about this. A lot of people saying Rewind being removed was not a good move, or that the pros didn't necessarily agree with it. I want to see what you think of that. What you think about kind of the online stuff. I never really know what to make of pros saying stuff like that online, whether they really mean it or if they're just kind of finding something to complain about. What do you think about Hacienda coming in?
Yeah, so I think on that note, in terms of like the player reception and reaction to it, Breaking Point tweeted that Rewind, Hardpoint, and S&D were removed due to being the most vetoed maps in the pool. CDL teams were not polled on the changes. So, um, you can look at that in two ways, really, and like I again, just for the sake of presenting both cases of the argument, in the CDL's eyes, they're probably like, oh, we don't have to, ask the teams what map they want replaced. We can just look at what map they aren't playing, and oh, it turns out Rewind, Hardpoint, and Rewind S&D are being vetoed the most, so they must not want to play it, and we're just going to replace it. So I can see that from the CDL's perspective, but at the same time, there could have been it's only 4 online matches for each team. I think it was 4 matches a day for 3 days and then 2 weeks, so that's 24 matches, so 24 sets of vetoes, I guess. And I don't know, it's still a small sample size no matter how you look at it, and it probably wouldn't have hurt for the CDL to try to reach out to some, even coaches or, veteran players or stuff like that, to get feedback, but there also just might not have been enough time for something like that. They wanted to get Hacienda in quick, even though there is a break going on now. So I don't know. There's a lot of ways to look at this, I feel like. And maybe later in the show this will be something we can hash out again in terms of some of the things we want to see from the CDL as a organization moving forward into 2025. But um, nonetheless, of how this move was made, it seemed inevitable, right? Like once Hacienda was announced, uh, it almost seemed inevitable it was going to be added in. Especially there were only 2 control maps in the initial map pool for the start of this year. So, regardless of how it played, really, it felt like that was just going to be at least tested, unless it was just absolutely terrible and didn't work. Like it was probably going to find a way in. Um, so yeah, the one thing to keep in mind, and I know I brought it up um, whenever we talked about Hacienda being revealed or leaked or whatever that was a couple episodes ago. Hacienda was a Black Ops 4 map, and it was 5v5, and now we're in 4v4. So um, I haven't played it in ranked. I played it for the first time on New Year's, or sorry, Christmas Eve, with Hype and some of the former ESN guys in Prop Hunt. So I didn't play it in a ranked setting or anything like that. I did see the window over on the one side of the map that Trem was talking about in one of the past episodes. So they did make some changes to the map from Black Ops 4, but yeah, I also at the same time, I haven't dove into ranked play at all yet. But from a pub experience, I definitely saw like people not liking Rewind, and I felt like it was one of the maps that it wasn't like, the worst map in the game. It wasn't my favorite map, but it wasn't the worst, and like I could tolerate playing it. So, um, I don't know. I guess, if the pros were vetoing it, there has to be some reason for it, that even if it was small sample size and just early on. And if that's all the CDL needed to pull the trigger on replacing it, maybe it'll work out in the long run. But Hacienda also has to be, a good map in itself too, because we're still going to be running into some issues if Hacienda doesn't work out, and we're, let's
Vault,
just
vault,
say
vault.
teams are instantly vetoing it, even though it's added to the pool. Not going to change anything if you replace the rewind veto with a Hacienda veto. It's just a
Mm.
different name. So we'll have to see how it all plays out, but definitely, I don't know. I feel like it. Again, small sample size because it's only the first 2 weeks of online qualifiers, but I think it's pretty safe to say this might be the earliest a map pool change has been made into the season. There might have been some times where like the initial CDL rule set was announced and then like some maps were added or removed when before play started, but I can't remember a map being added like before the first tournament or during the qualifiers of the first tournament. Maybe I'm very forgetful, but either way, it's exciting that the CDL is at least taking that initiative to get a map in there. We just got to hope it works out.
Yeah, I think it's a for the CDL at least. It's a do if you're a do. You're damned if you do, excuse me, and you're damned if you don't. Like, there's just no way for them to win in this kind of situation. And I'm just talking about the Call of Duty League, not like in pretty much like the operations people. Like, there's just no winning in this kind of situation for them because they're coming in and they're thinking, okay, we're giving you a better map in theory. We're giving you a map that has already been in competitive Call of Duty before, a popular, at least somewhat popular map in a previous game. People know what it is. People seem to like it, and we're taking out a map that isn't played very much, isn't real well liked, and there was still a ton of complaining about it. So I'm not sure if that is, indicative of the CDL making a bad decision or if Call of Duty pros were just kind of annoyed that they weren't given the input or given an option to kind of veto this kind of situation. I just don't know. Like it seems like it's more. I agree with you that in theory the CDL players should have a say and there should be some kind of feedback or some kind of communication between the operations crew and the players so that these decisions can be made jointly instead of by one party and not the other. Like GAs are kind of the players' way of making decisions without the operations crew getting involved. And I think we're all in agreement that the GAs a lot of times go too far and make it worse for the viewers and make it worse for the league in general. And so you could say the same exact thing about the operations team coming in and making these decisions without consulting the players. I think we just have to wait and see. Like you said, like there's just no reason to, at least from a fan's perspective or a viewer's perspective, there's no reason for me to get up in arms about this and say, "Oh my God, I can't believe you would take rewind out," even though, like, it's not being played very often. Like that's, or at least in some game modes, like it's just not something that, like, if you took out Vault, I think you could say, well, that's going to change a lot because this is the most played map. Like teams just love this map, or I don't even know if they love it, but like it is a map that is better than other maps. So I don't know. Like I just think the more maps that you have that are viable for competitive in general, that is a good thing. And I think if we could get to a point where we have even more than 5 maps in Search and Destroy, more than 5 maps in Hardpoint, more than 3 maps in Control, where you're going through multiple rounds of vetoes essentially to try to pick the map. I think that it works better than what we have now, where it's like we are just scraping the bare minimum, just trying to make sure that we have a minimum number of maps that we can kind of like just play a series with. So we'll see. I don't really know if it's going to work out or not, but I don't know. Like it seems like it's fine for the moment, at least. The only thing I'm not really a big fan of is just making this change at this point in time. And it's not like, well, it's too quick or whatever. Like, I just think when you are in these qualifiers and like the minor and stuff, I think like the first major should be like, okay, after the first major, we can make these changes. And that's kind of that's at least how I see it. Like, you have these 4 weeks of qualifiers, you have a minor, and then you have a major. and after that it's like the second major set, second minor, the second major qualifiers, those will be completely different. Like obviously that's not how Call of Duty's ever worked because they drop updates like a week before a tournament, the week of a tournament, and players are like, well, we're just gonna have to play on the old patch and try to not update like our PCs and stuff. Like that kind of stuff happens all the time. But just from a personal point of view, like I just don't think that there should be that much change, and how much change it will be kind of determined or will be determined by the players. But I'm just in general against these kind of moves. But if you're looking at the opposite way, you could say, well, they listened to community feedback. They knew that they needed a different map or they needed one more map, and they got it. And we'll see how it plays out. Uh, I don't
I,
know if you had anything else on that before we move on.
I don't know if I get your point on waiting out the full initial cycle there, but I feel like it's just, especially with the break, like it feels like a good time to make this change, especially when there were only two maps for control
Yeah,
and literally vault control is being played every single match except for two, I believe. Um, so I think that's the biggest thing. I guess maybe like a middle ground between my point of, getting the map in there and yours of waiting it out. Like maybe they could have just added Hacienda control and then waited out the major and all that stuff and added Hacienda hardpoint and search after that. But um we don't have to live in that world of if ands and buts, but you know, we know we're seeing Hacienda now, and I feel like unless it's just an unplayable map early on, like this is an opportunity the teams have to practice over this little break. I know team players are spending it with spending the holidays with their families and whatnot, but um the break gives you that opportunity to practice a new map like that, so it makes sense to me. But I get your point too at the same time.